Good evening, and I'm very happy to have you again on the podcast. And this time we're going to talk about your most recent books and most recent research. You collaborated with scholars from my area. One of them is Amjad Majid from Iraq. And how did you initiate collaboration with the Iraqi-based scholar who recently published a book in Arabic about the embassy of Simon of Saint Quentin?
Well, he reached out to me. It was almost exactly a year ago. I suddenly start receiving emails from him. He was sending them to some defunct address and not getting a reply from me, but eventually he found me. And he said, basically, if I can quote him, I've been watching your wonderful research on the history of the Mongols for a long time. That's his words, not mine. And I used some of it in my doctoral thesis that dealt with the Mongols and European envoys. And he said he was publishing a book on these adventures of Western emissaries, papal emissaries to, for instance, the Middle East. And he wanted to use my translation of Simon of St. Quentin. And he asked for permission. And I said, of course, I'd be honored. And he translated it into Arabic. I didn't know he was gonna I didn't know my name was gonna be on the front cover with him. I wasn't sure what he was gonna do, but suddenly, as a weird you know, irony in a way, this book came out called the Mirror of History. Uh, it records, for instance, Simon of St. Quentin's report, and he took that from my English translation and put it into Arabic. So my first actual book on Mongol history, I can't even read,
Nice.
but I know the gist of it. I saw the chapter structure and everything. So he translated the English into Arabic, and now there's a first translation of Simon of Saint Quentin's existing text in Arabic and published in by seems like a very good publisher. Like they really have a very interesting cover design. You mind if I share that
Yeah, please.
on the screen?
One of the main ideas of this podcast is to disseminate knowledge about different books, different projects, different initiatives and collaborations between scholars.
Yes. So there's the book, and I like these sort of uh, he'll often greet me, the Dr. Amjad
Amjad, yeah.
Majid will often greet me by saying, "Greetings from sunny Mesopotamia."
Yeah.
So he seems to be rather connected to that ancient root of Iraq's early civilization. It's kind of reflected on the cover design.
Nice.
And it doesn't have this red circle in. I just added that, but yeah, I was not expecting to be so included. I was so I quite appreciated that, and he might be doing further work using my translations of Friar Julian
Yeah.
and Friar Ricardus, for instance. And I hope someday to make another website providing the first English translation of Ricoldo di Montecroci's book of travels, where he also traveled through the Middle East and Near East and describes everything, including the Mongols. So I thought that would be a good next project to provide a sort of digital humanities, easily accessible, translated Latin work. So that's just sort of something I have down the road. And if Amjad Majid wants to use that and provide an Arabic version as well, if he hasn't already, I'll be happy to help him with that as well.
Well, you should also, when you're free, of course, visit us here and maybe establish a collaboration with other Arab scholars and Arab historians, because this region is very active, unfortunately, because of the political situation and security situation. Many of the countries in the region are in different wars and different
Well,
turmoil, but yeah, it's definitely worth of visit. And the correlation between Mongol states and the Middle East is well documented. They played
yes,
a
I
very,
was
very important
surprised
role.
by the interest when he posted on Facebook about it. There were all these comments, and I could just quick translate and see them all saying, is it available in Egypt?"
Yeah,
But yeah, there are strong Mongol connections to the history of that whole region, and
absolutely.
so they're conscious of it. A lot of the scholars, and there's interest. And he did invite me tacitly to a conference in Kufa planned in the
Yeah.
future about this book release, and if that materializes, I'll be more than happy to show up there. And
I mean, every 3 years, the Hashemite family and Jordanian universities and international universities and institutes organize international conference on archaeology and history of Jordan. And it goes from Washington to Amman, from Amman to Irbit, from Irbit to Athens, from Athens to Paris. Every 3 years, they have a different host, whether in Jordan or abroad. This year, Athens will host the conference. Usually, there are between 200 and 250 archaeologists and historians who take part in that event. And of course, His Royal Highness Prince Hassan is a patron of that event. He established that event in 1981, and he always goes there at least to give the opening speech. But many times he's spending more than just one day at the conference. So I'm thinking of going to Athens in September if I have time, and if everything goes well, I may go to that conference.
excellent. Well, yeah, I would like to branch out, and
Of course.
the great thing about the Mongol Empire is it ruled so much territory that it really crossed regions, and so there's all these interesting groups of scholars now, kind of in their own,
Yeah,
focusing on their own sort of
absolutely.
specific.
From China to Canada, and from Canada to Poland and other East European countries. Unfortunately, Mongol studies are not that popular in former Yugoslavia. We have a couple of scholars who are specialized in Mongol studies, but I think they're not enough. We need more experts than what we have at the
Yeah,
moment. I'm talking about Serbia and Croatia.
Alexander Uzelic is a
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
impressive
he's a very
scholar.
good guy.
Like I always find myself agreeing with his, the times I've talked to him. I'm like, yep,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I think too.
he's a
That's my
serious scholar.
definition of a good scholar. Yeah, so he's doing a lot too.
He's doing a lot, and unfortunately, he's alone. He's a one-man show, and they should give him more public space and more. They should acknowledge him more. This is my opinion. But
Yes.
regarding the embassy of Simon of Saint Quentin, what's the main difference and the main similarity between his mission and the mission of Carpini?
Well, we have a volume coming out again this year. Another one besides the Arabic book and my monograph. There's a third volume coming out shortly that I worked with Roman Hautala from Finland and some
Yeah,
Hungarian scholars. And Roman's assessment was that both John of Plano Carpini and Simon of St. Quentin's missions were kind of fruitless. But I would say, on the detail level, Carpini's mission went a lot more successfully.
yeah,
There were less gaffes, less faux pas, and there was no near execution of the
Yeah, no
friars in
tensions. No tensions.
no tensions.
Yes,
I
the
think
mission
Carpini may
went
have been a
smoothly through.
kind of a relaxed person, you know, a
Yeah,
more adaptable and friendly guy. So he seemed to navigate,
of course.
you know, through Russia, through across the Mongol Empire, all the way to Mongolia. He met the Khan face to face and talked, and no disasters occurred on his
Of
mission.
course.
But what happened is he gave two papal bulls from Pope Innocent IV to the Khan Guyuk. These were translated, you know, very thoroughly and carefully into Mongolian, and then the Khan was a bit offended by the message of the Pope. The first bull urged him to accept Christianity and explained the basics of Christianity. And the second letter said, "Why did you kill all those people? We demand that you stop immediately killing Christians and non-Christians." Might surprise people to know that he said, and the non-Christians too, stop killing them. And you're going to get punished someday. If not now in this world, you'll be punished in the
In the
afterlife. And
afterlife.
Guyuk wrote back. Guyuk, so he wrote a kind of snarky message as well and had it sent back. Luckily, it still exists in the Vatican, and it's in Persian, which was the middle, you know, the lingua franca
Yeah.
between the Mongols and the Latins. They realized there's Persian speakers on both sides. So it's in Persian, translated from Mongolian. It's got Guyuk's stamp on it, and it's I might have it open right now. I could he said, you asked me, Guyuk Khan said to the Pope, you asked me why I killed all these people, and you tell me I should become a Christian, and the way to do this. And he goes, well, I'll just give you a quick answer. Because those people did not obey the word of God, Tengri heaven, and the command of Chinggis Khan and the Khan, but took counsel to slay our envoys. Therefore, God ordered us to destroy them and gave them up into our hands. And then Goya Khan started to say things like, and you say you know God's will. Well, how did we conquer this empire from where the sun rises to the sun sets? How could we do that against God's will? This Mongol Empire must be God's will. So, and
Yeah, it's a
who do you think?
logical assumption.
Yeah, and he said, and why do you think you know the truth or who God deigns to give his blessing to? Like, basically, he said, who the hell are you? You
Yeah.
know, to the Pope. And yeah, and he said, you're if you want to survive, you'll come here in person and submit in person. You and all the kings of Europe will basically bow before me, or else I'll know you as an enemy. So, of course, you can't say Carpini's mission was a huge success.
No,
You know,
on the contrary.
he
But at
didn't
least
baptize the Khan.
it wasn't a disaster like Simon's mission. Simon's mission was a
Yeah,
total disaster.
you get a feeling from Carpini's mission that he met a lot of people, he got along with them, they shared information with him. And so, if nothing else, he came back with a trove of kind of secrets about the Mongol Empire, the geography, the people, attitudes. So, you can say it was a success in the sense that he came back alive
Yeah,
with a
in
lot
one
of
piece.
information. Yeah. And he, you know, he was treated well, sounds like. It's a pretty rough journey across Eurasia in the 13th century, but he seems to have been. There's even another report. I won't go into it, but another friar who knew about the journey records that the Mongols would joke with the friars and tell them, you know, with I don't know how they communicated, but in basic language, they were trying to make jokes with them and tell them like stories of the conquests. And so it seems like they had a good rapport. Carpini was able to navigate through all these challenges and get back home with secret information, which he immediately gave, and it was translated all across Europe or transmitted. I mean, all these ideas of how to fight the Mongols, and he also figured out there's no point submitting to them because he talked to people who did submit to them, and they said that it
Mm. We got frozen now.
got a lot worse.
I lost what you said in the last 2 minutes. Can you just repeat what happened with the mission of? Yeah. Now we have 10 minutes, but we're going to continue. Yeah, can you just let me check if it's recording or not. Yeah, it's recording. So what did you say last? Because I lost you for a few seconds.
I was just mentioning that Carpini's mission was a success in the sense that he came back from Mongolia with a very, really the first really good ideas or realistic descriptions of East Asia to Europe. He described Inner Asia. These were all unknowns. Like
Yes.
people in the Middle Ages in the 1200s were still using ancient literature like Greek and Roman geography, talking about, the people with their head in the middle of the chest or one-legged
Yeah.
people. There was kind of fanciful ideas about
Yeah,
the East
of course.
because people didn't go there. It was just too dangerous, they thought. And so Carpini was able to bring realistic geographical and ethnographical descriptions of the whole region. And suddenly Europe had, this was a breakthrough. I'm surprised it doesn't get, that this is
Eaten
still a niche subject.
by humans with three heads, and humans whose head is in the middle of their torso, and all kinds of
Yeah.
monstrous beings that exist in Inner Asia. This is what they perceived
And
them.
cannibals, of course.
And cannibals, of
They
course.
thought there were cannibals out there, which, they might not have been wrong in ancient times about that.
Exactly.
But they
Even in modern times, they eat all kinds of animals over there.
but Carpini he brought these realistic descriptions of what it was actually going on beyond the frontiers of Christendom and Europe.
Yeah.
And that was invaluable. I mean, this material encouraged other people to go over there, like Marco Polo. And that ultimately inspired even people like Columbus. Columbus had a copy of Marco Polo's book and filled with his own annotations. So he was using these 1200s geographical descriptions by traders and emissaries. He was using that as his
Manual.
guidebook of
So, yeah,
yeah.
to his manual.
And Carpini also knew. I mean, he came back with a good idea. He said, "We can't submit to these guys. We can't cooperate with them because they're inflexible. We're inflexible." It was a clash of two ideologies, like the Christian great calling to convert the world to Christianity. That's sort of what the Pope is going for, to see a Christianity worldwide. The Mongols are going for seeing the Mongol Empire conquer the whole world. And neither of these sides are really going to give in to the other. And so Carpini said that leaves resistance, however terrible, as our only option. And we shouldn't bother communicating with these guys. We shouldn't bother humoring them. Or at least if you communicate with them, just don't just keep repeating the same message. Convert to Christianity. And it may have kind of triggered the Mongols, having this meeting with this papal emissary. So it could have had could have been dangerous to do this, because once the Mongol Khan has said submit or die, it's problematic if the Pope ignores that message. So, but Simon of St. Quentin's mission, by comparison, went way worse than Carpini's, and it's a weirdly ignored story. Carpini's been translated into many languages, but 10 years ago, I had Simon of St. Quentin. I was wanting to read it, and I realized it's never been translated. So I just made a vow, sort of, and I just said, I'm going to be the guy who does this.
Yeah.
No matter how bad the translation, I'm going to do this. And eventually,
you are the pioneer, because no one else translated Simon's account on Tatars. And what do you think? Why other scholars in the past didn't pay attention to Simon's embassy to
That
Tatars?
was what I was, that's what I was myself wondering the whole
Yeah,
time. I'm like, how it's a good sized, lengthy Latin source
yeah,
about something really important by a person who actually went to the Mongol Empire. And you could only, people were just sort of in secondary literature, just citing whatever some scholar 100 years ago had said about this mission. So Simon of St. Quentin was sort of neglected completely.
yeah.
And I realized people aren't citing it. They're those who could use it, maybe they've mentioned one or two little things about it, but I thought, why is this source being neglected? And I'll explain my theories about that in the next section, I think, because
Yeah, now we're running out of time. I just wanted to ask you when did you translate Simon's account on Tatars and other ethnic groups that he met during his journey?
around 2019, we were supported by the Kalus Gulbenkian Foundation,
Yeah,
an Armenian sort of cultural
nice.
promotion body, and they funded this project. I said this relates to Armenia. I really tried to get that, emphasize the Armenian
Of
connections that
course.
come up in the story. Uh, Probably overemphasized them, but they ended up thinking the project was worth it and they funded it. And then, but it was tough. Like that was it's a lengthy book. It's not like a little pamphlet or something.
Yeah,
Uh, and so and it's difficult subject matter.
of course.
It's Latin Europeans going into the Middle East to meet
Of course.
Mongols. So there's lots of foreign terminology and they're just, sounding out words that they
Of
hear.
course.
So it is a complicated text, I thought, and it took a long time. And we made
Of
this
course.
digital humanities website, some Hungarian based scholars and myself, and it got a little hasty and rushed at the end, but we got it done according to the contract. But
Yeah.
then since then, I've improved it and made another digital humanities website that's hosted by St. Petersburg State University in Russia. So I'm glad that I did that because now it has a much more secure, you
Of
know,
course.
foundation. Because our own website, I don't know, could just disappear someday. But if it's in a university sort of
Yeah, it's not going to
server,
disappear if
etc.
it's part of the university or the institute. Yeah,
Yeah, and I so and now that there's an Arabic version, in print,
perfect.
that's
You're
that's
going
another.
to become more popular, and you're going to. This will open new doors of cooperation between you and scholars in this part of the world. That would be
I
good.
hope so.
I'm going to send you another link in a few minutes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Can you tell us more about your plans for this spring and this year? Because you told me that you're planning more books.
Yes, so I have a monograph coming out at last about the Mongol invasion of Europe. Should be out next month.
Excellent.
I think I'm going to write my own review of it and say it's a groundbreaking work. No, I'm just joking about that, but
Yeah.
it is. It will be like what I will say if I can praise it is that even people who've read about the Mongol invasion of Europe over and over again, and they feel like it's the same old tracks. It's going to be like a new story.
Redundant work. Yeah. That's
Yes,
what
so
some
that's
people would say.
exciting. And then, more or less at the same time, I have the critical edition of many of these Latin texts that I worked on. I'm a co-author, co-translator with Roman Hautala and my colleagues in Hungary, uh, Josef Laszlowski, Balázs Nagy, Jack Wilson is involved. And we translated, I mean, this is the critical annotated edition of Simon of St. Quentin. It will be in print. So, but it includes Friar Julian, which was not translated
Yeah.
until recently, and Friar Ricardus, and the Otto Boyron collection of letters written during the Mongol invasion. It includes a totally unknown by scholarship interrogation of a Mongol prisoner
Mhm.
that was recorded by in a book called the Livre by um, a certain Moses ben Abraham. He was at this interrogation in what's modern Belgium of a captured Kuman prisoner taken from the Mongol army, and that guy
Yeah.
was telling who the commanders are and what the purpose of the invasion is, and Chinggis Khan. So that will appear for the first time, translated from Old French. We have a letter by a Templar. Anyway, we have a lot of Dominican sources. Jan Długosz's chapter on the Mongol invasion of Poland, and this is all in one volume. Um, and that should be coming out in a matter. I've already seen the print layout, so it's close to ready as well.
How
And
many
so those two
pages
books.
your monography will have?
I think that book is like three over 300 pages.
Nice.
It's part of a series that Central European University started to put out of translating these really important sources from Eastern Europe, and
Mhm.
that was actually how I first became aware of Central European University. I bought these books, and I just a few of these books, and they had the Latin on one side and the English on the other. Uh, Really detailed notes about
Yeah.
textual variations between manuscripts, and I just thought, who are these people like doing this amazing work? And
Yeah.
so I'm proud to say that I will also appear on one of these volumes, and that I
Nice.
was able to contribute to one. So
So
that's
it's a
another
breakthrough.
exciting.
It's a breakthrough book, and the guy who studied at the Central European University is Dr. Gage that we mentioned before in our unofficial conversation. He studied there, and then he moved to the States and UK, and actually his PhD thesis is totally different from what you and Alexander are doing. He studied African American political thinkers in 19th century and 20th century. So he spent lots of time studying African American political activists from 19th century thinkers to Malcolm X.
So it's interesting that he established a liberal arts university and made a medieval studies department since it's.
Yeah,
But apparently, I heard the backstory that George Soros thought the Middle Ages were important. And, you
of
know,
course.
it was really important to know about them. So they luckily established this medieval studies department, and I was amazed by these people. Like they spoke about the Middle Ages as this lived, real world, uh, and they were using archaeologists and every kind of
Absolutely, yes.
expert was there.
True.
And so I was lucky to have the opportunity to make that
I mean,
network with them.
even during the war in Syria, Hungarian archaeological mission was active in parts of in coastal parts of Syria, in Tartus and near Crac de Chevalier Castle, which was a headquarter of Hospitaller Knights. So
Yeah, well,
unfortunately,
they are
yeah,
very
they're very
adventurous.
active.
Those archaeologists from Hungary will go anywhere.
Mm.
And yes, and so they I was able to team up with them and produce this book that will provide English critical editions of all these texts. And in the case of Simon of St. Quentin, we used the oldest manuscript of the Speculum Historiale. We used like a 1471 uh, editio princeps of the full text from Strasbourg. We used a lot of different versions of the text to make sure that every single variation in the text is represented and it's annotated. So it's going to be the edition of
Yeah,
Simon of St. Quentin and many other texts that have never been seen in English. And so I like to think that will be of value
of
to.
course, of course, it will be valid. And what were Simon's accounts on other groups and realms that he met during his journey?
So he was picked up by this mission sent by the Pope from Lyon, France,
Yeah.
through Italy, and they got to the Mediterranean, to the Holy Land,
Yeah.
the European
Of course.
holdings at the time in the
Yeah.
1240s. And Simon joined the party there, and then they journeyed into the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, which was
Yeah.
basically Anatolia,
Of
Turkey.
course.
They traveled all through there. They went to Georgia, they went to Armenia, um, and then eventually in Armenia they met up with the Mongol army and were basically taken prisoner and held there for a couple months. And then on the return, they may have traveled through some other parts of the Middle East. So he knows a lot about the Seljuks. I think that is why, even if the mission didn't really lead to anything monumental in history, this text should have been translated
Yeah.
because it's an invaluable source of
Of course.
Seljuk history during the time that the Mongols imposed
Yeah.
their rule over the Seljuks. And you learn about the family dynamics of the ruling dynasty. All kinds of secret information is being told to Simon's party by insiders
Yeah.
about Armenian politics, about the Mongols. And so the text is, unfortunately, Simon's book is actually lost. We don't have the full book,
Mm.
but sections of it survived in books 30, 31, and 32 of the Speculum Historiale, composed by Vincent of Beauvais, who was an encyclopedist and a Dominican friar, and he was the tutor of Louis IX's children, no less. But he wrote this massive uh, book called the Speculum Maius, the Great Mirror.
Yeah.
It was divided into three sections, and the most popular one by far was the history, the Speculum Historiale. And it takes, it goes from the beginning of time, as this friar believed it, and the beginning of humanity, all the way to 1250, basically. And so the last section is really describing Louis IX's Seventh Crusade to Egypt.
Yeah.
But in the course of that, he describes the Mongols. And book 30 mainly describes Mongol habits and customs and their ways of waging war, and tells about the rise of Chinggis Khan and the conquest of the Khwarezm Empire and places like that. Book 31 is mainly concerned with all the countries and states that Simon's party encountered, like the Georgians, Armenians, and especially the Seljuks. So
Yeah,
the
because
politics.
these countries were not well known in the West, and we didn't have many Western travelers going to Georgia, Armenia, or having interaction with Golden Horde, or God forbid, going
Yeah,
over
so
there.
I've noticed a
Yeah.
lot of interest from, the people who funded the initial translation project, the Armenians, and Turk,
Yeah.
Turkish history
Of course.
historians are
Of course.
looking at it quite often and reading it. So that I think it's of great value because Simon is an outsider. He's from Western Europe.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
he's describing these societies as an
Yeah.
outsider.
Of course.
Because if you have Armenian sources, they're not going to mention obvious things about themselves and their history, or the Mongols aren't going to describe them, the way they make, kumis, or the way
Yeah.
they ride horses,
Yeah.
but as an outsider, this is all of interest and important to him. So he described in detail these societies. And so you learn things that you wouldn't learn from another type of source written by someone from that region.
But how come that his account went under the radar for so many years?
It's a complete mystery to me. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe there were no translations, and that's why I took it upon myself and felt the calling to do it,
Of course.
because it's such a valuable source for what's going on in the 14 or the 1240s. And I think partly it's the negativity. Simon is a hostile. He's very anti-Mongol. He's had
Yeah.
terrible experiences with them, and he's describing them as negatively as possible. So that could be part of it.
Maybe they
Some of
sent the
his,
wrong person to that embassy.
he sent a high-strung group of friars, and they were
It's the same.
absolutely.
I have to make a digression. It's the same as a guy who studied at my university anthropology, and he politically supports Briggs, and at the same time he hates Asians and blacks. He's a typical racist. So the whole thing about Briggs is to gather different ethnic groups, different races, and establish a functional economic and political alliance between these ethnic groups and races. And that guy, only because he hates West, supports BRICS, while at the same time he keeps his animosity towards alien races and alien people. It's a complete schizophrenia. So yeah, let's continue.
Yeah, war and tension make strange bedfellows, as they
Oh
say.
yeah, exactly.
And but yeah, so Simon is, even when he meets Christians, his report's kind of hostile. He says, "Oh, the
Oh,
Armenians, they're doing all kinds of pagan,
yeah, they're
weird
not Roman
things."
Catholics.
And he says, "Georgia, all the Georgian priests are usurers. They trade money on interest, and they only get their positions by buying them." It's probably, and he says they're a bunch of
Probably
drunks.
it's not inaccurate.
It's
Probably there's
probably accurate,
some
but
truth
nonetheless,
in this.
I think maybe the hostility of his report sort of made those who read Latin think it's better to just leave this in Latin. When 19th century writers would provide a translation of Latin texts, if there was a really sordid, obscene section, they would just leave it in Latin,
Yeah.
which is, I think, obnoxious, but they would. And it's a little bit like that. I think people who read it just thought maybe it's better not to translate this.
Exactly.
Because the book 32 is about the actual embassy to the Mongols. And the friars, actually, a lot of the chapters are just one day back and forth between Baiju Noyan's emissaries, his diplomat representatives and translators. They come out and meet the friars just out in the open, and they're having this back and forth. And it really goes sideways very quickly, because the friars have showed up with a Georgian friar alongside them now to kind of help with the translations and stuff, and because Georgia was occupied by the Mongols, and they carry these same bulls of the Pope, demanding conversion to Christianity and that they cease their violence immediately. So they have these bulls they want to give to Baiju Noyan in a reception.
Yeah.
But Baiju's in his tent and he won't let them come in. And he's just sending out his diplomats.
Yeah.
And Askelin is the leader of the party that Simon's part of, the Dominican Friar Party. And he says right away that the Pope, we're emissaries of the Pope, who is greatest on earth. And then the Mongol representatives say, how dare you say
exactly
someone is greater?
It doesn't sound like a good beginning of their mission, or a good beginning of the interaction between them and the Tatars.
And Carpini's party carried a lot of...
They pissed them off immediately. With the first sentence, they pissed them off.
Exactly. It was literally the first sentence. They got off on the wrong foot. And then it gets even worse, because giving gifts to important leaders and generals and princes was sort of expected. This is Mongol diplomacy. If you want to move around the Mongol Empire, you have to give these gifts. Simon's party got nothing. Yeah, like Carpini would give
when someone comes from abroad to visit me here, I expect them to bring something that I like, either a book or a bottle of good booze. But just to come empty-handed is not a good gesture.
That's what the Mongol diplomats said. They said, you come before us with empty hands and you expect to meet our lords. This is an insult nobody's ever done to him before. And they said, well, we're just messengers. This is our job. Our boss is the Pope. We're going to give you these messages, and then we're going to go back. That's what we came to do. We didn't come here to give you gifts. In fact, usually it's the Pope who receives gifts. So these guys were almost on a suicide mission, because they were...
Yeah, it sounds like a suicide mission.
Well, it's quickly turned into one, because after a few of these exchanges, the Mongol diplomats go back to Baiju's tent, and then they were gone for a long time. And Simon and his party later found out that Baiju finally had enough, and he ordered their execution. He said, these are the most obnoxious diplomats I've ever met. We're going to make an example out of them. And the friars were saved by two people. They later found out. One was a sort of a guest reception person, a high rank Mongol. He was to take care of envoys when they arrived, and he said, "You can't kill the envoys. You remember you did this some time ago, and remember how angry the Khan was with you." And he said, "So if you order me to kill them, I'm just going to flee to Mongolia and I'm going to report you to the Khan as a criminal." And then another person who spoke up for the friars was one of Baiju's wives, his senior wife, because he's a Noyan, so he has multiple wives. And she said, if you so just and they're not going to bring their gifts anymore. They're going to take some other route, circuitous route, to just avoid you because you're going to have such a bad reputation for this if you shed innocent blood. And
Yeah.
and Chinggis Khan also said, don't kill emissaries, so that you shouldn't be doing that. That
Yeah,
was one of his sort of
we don't have
rules.
many records of
So finally,
emissaries
Baiju,
being killed or maltreated.
yeah, normally the Mongol emissaries would be killed, and
Yeah,
then the Mongols would use that as a pretext to just launch total annihilation and destruction
yeah,
of that country because their envoys were killed. But they tended to treat envoys well. That was why the Pope was sending emissaries, because a Russian said the Mongols are, dangerous people, but the good thing about them is they respect emissaries.
yeah.
But when Simon's party starts breaking every rule of Mongol etiquette and decency, it quick and keeps saying these defiant statements. It got really bad, and so finally the diplomats return and they say you have to bow down to Baiju Noyan because he represents Chinggis Khan.
Yeah.
So you have to kowtow literally and touch your head to the ground.
Yeah.
And the friars, of course, talk about this and they go, no, we'd rather get our heads cut off than bow down because we're not going to send the message to the world that the King of France and the Pope and Europe has submitted to you. We're not going to let that story travel around that we were seen bowing down to you. And you're not our authority. Our authority is the Pope. So it got really tense and heated. And Simon will often say the Mongols were roaring and totally insane. He won't say what they said most of the time, but he'll just go, they lost it when we said this. And one time, he does record what one of the Mongols said. And the friars were saying, if Baiju Noyan just becomes a Christian, we'll kiss the soles of his feet. We'll bow down to him as the lowliest of servants. But unless he does that, we're not going to even bow to him. And one of the diplomats on the Mongol side said, you want our rulers to become Christians and become dogs like you? Are not all, is not your Pope and are not all you dogs? Dog is a kind of a nasty insult in that region.
Of course.
So this was descending into chaos, basically, this meeting. And
What happened with
finally,
Simon of Saint Quentin later on after his embassy to Mongols? Did he go to other embassies, or his career as a diplomat was finished over there?
I think they never sent him on another one.
Yeah.
That party
from the obvious reasons, he wasn't maybe a good material for that.
Yes, Baiju never let them actually meet him face to face, but he finally gave them out two messages, one from Goya Khan and one from Baiju himself. And the first thing he says, it's actually quite funny. I'll quote it here. This is a copy of the letter that was sent by Baiju Noyan to the Lord Pope. And it's the decree of the Khan himself. He represents the Khan. And he wrote, Pope, know this. Your emissaries came and brought us your letter. Your emissaries spoke big words. We do not know whether you instructed them to speak that way to us or if they spoke at their own behest. So literally, Baiju Noyan's like, did you tell them to act like that, or was it? And the idea that they spoke big words is kind of funny. Their words kind of got them into a bit of trouble, and their just general lack of awareness of
course,
Mongol etiquette. You have
it was a little bit autistic to come all the way from France and act like Mongols are inferior civilization or inferior state entity compared to the papal state.
And the Dominicans made it very clear that that was their view.
Of course,
Um,
because they're
when the
fundamentalists.
Mongol diplomats said, "Don't you know who the Khan is?" They said, "No, we've never heard of. We don't know
Yeah.
who Baiju is. We don't know who the. All we heard is some barbarian people came from the east slaughtering everyone." So they seem to be trying to provoke a
Yeah,
response from
of
the
course.
Mongols. But all that ended up happening was they were just left semi-starving in a tent far away from Baiju Noyan's tent. And when they would try to leave, they'd say, "Can we hand over our letters and just leave?" They, they'd get the answer back, "No, you have to wait. You have to wait for the whole army to assemble here because you came to spy on our army anyway. So we want to show you how big it is." And they were near starving. And this is when Simon of St. Quentin says his only nice thing about the Mongols, really. He says, "There's one good thing about them. If you go up to eat with them, they'll share food with you. Even if they don't have much, they share it."
Yeah,
And so you realize that's probably how he clung to survival. Him and his group of about 4 or 5 friars, they just had to sort of beg for food.
yeah,
So they're near starvation, and then this huge magnate arrives. Argun Aka arrives from Mongolia, and the Mongols have a 7-day drinking fest where
nice.
they're drinking kumis, the mare's milk,
Yeah.
and singing. And so these friars are just having to sit there through the 7-day party, probably feeling miserable the whole time. And then when that was over, they finally bribed one influential Mongol. He said, "We have to get out of here because we have to get back to the Mediterranean before the bad autumn season starts."
Yeah.
So they finally bribed him, and he went and said something to Baiju, and then they were released after 2 months of misery. And yeah, I don't think they ever went on another diplomatic mission again. But that exchange, that time they had when they got to look the Mongols in the eyes and share ideas with them and see who they
Yeah,
were and debate with them, I think that would have stayed with them for the rest of their lives, and
of
that would
course.
have been their most, uh, you know,
Well,
strongly impressive memory in their lives, I suspect.
what do you want to say for the end of our conversation regarding Simon's mission or regarding your further projects?
Just that I'm happy that we have the St. Petersburg website with a polished version of the
Yeah,
text that survives of Simon of St. Quentin's work, and I recommend readers in your part of the
yeah,
world who might be interested in a description of the region from the 1240s by someone who's there,
yeah.
an outsider. It's valuable, and the critical edition, like I said, is coming out very shortly in print, um, within a few months. That contains Simon of St. Quentin and many other texts, and it should be
Maybe two of
helpful.
us can talk about Simon's trip to Levant, Middle East, and his accounts on broader Levant because he also went to Anatolia. So it would be maybe a good feature article for my newspaper. We can talk about that.
Yes, and maybe the last thing I want to leave you is there were some powerful lines in this book. On one hand, both parties are sort of unlikable. It's like a Quentin Tarantino movie. They're
Yeah.
they're inflexible. But on the other hand, there are some great moments in this story. And one of my favorite ones was when the Mongol diplomats, after they've actually ordered the execution of these friars, and then they've called it back, and they come out again, and the friars refuse to bow down, and the diplomats finally say, "Okay, what exactly do you do in your part of the world to show honor to your lords, since you won't bow down? What can you do as a sign of respect?"
Yeah.
And it said that Askelin, the leader, just pulled his hood back a little bit and nodded quickly, and he said, "That's all we do." And he said, "And we don't fear your tyranny. We fear no mortal man." It's actually he gets really into this, you know, sort of movie like speech. I
Yeah.
don't know if he really said it. He says like, "We'll never surrender to your tyranny," and it's you know, you can't help but cheer for Askelin as blockheaded as he was through this whole process. You like when they were actually faced with execution, he just launched into this eloquent, inspiring sort of speech, and I think that was my personal favorite part of the whole story.
Thank you so much. And we're going to talk very soon. Maybe in a couple of days, I'm going to send you a couple of questions. I need like 2, 3 questions regarding the mission.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for your time, and we're going to talk in April about your monography. Whenever you
All
are
right. See you.
available, we're going to talk about monography on the Tatar conquest of Europe and other, of course, areas, because they were a very global realm, and their conquest was very dramatic at that time. All the best. All the
Thanks.
best. Bye.